the hands that pulled you from the womb into the world, that made your childhood meals, that you raised in class, that you held, that you shook, placed on a shoulder, that you used to swim, climb, dance, write your name, open doors and letters, make your bed, button your shirt or blouse, the hands you touch to the face of a loved one, and they to yours, or a flower, or flowing ocean water, that you clap with joy, that you wave to say hello, and say goodbye. Welcome to the latest Floating Poetry broadcast, and thank you for leaning in to the 98th show in my ongoing weekly series, coming to you live from the well-held coast of Rhode Island. This is your poet and poetorialist Colin Goedecke, a voice for living our days more poetically, more expressively, more soulfully. Broadcast 97 took us into the heat and the cold of all kinds, literal to imaginal, sensate to cinematic, from the searing heat of deserts to the wild cold of Arctic tundras, from being hot-blooded to cool-headed, the quenching to the warmly fortifying, a spectrum of feelings that they evoke and their effects, challenges, and contrasts. Taking you now in hand here and into a show of hands, the hands, considering and celebrating them, riffing on and relating them to varied dimensions of life, culture, love, language, and more. I had such a good time sourcing the commentary, poetry, and other material for our broadcast, coming across new stories, curiosities, and poets. So let's have an interesting and possibly inspiring time experiencing it all together. Why don't we open with a poem from Rome, from Roma, Italia, where I was so captivated. This was back into September of 1997, so enchanted, and from that moment and that poem, which just came out of me as I was witnessing this, I was truly uncorked as a poet in a way I had not been to that point, and the cork has never gone back in since. This is on the Via del Gesù, the Street of Jesus. Trattoria Anno Domini. 1,000 years later, on the Via del Gesù, two Roman noses, uno piccolo, uno grande, converse across a table, hands waving like wands in movements ancient and familiar. Trattoria Anno Domini. From the Marginalian, some notes about a vintage book by John Napier, physician specializing in hands. And the book title, very simple, is Hands, and originally published in 1980. A richly illustrated treasure trove of insight into the anatomy, function, and evolution of one of our most fundamentally human features. From handedness to fingerprints to gestures to grooming to the making and usage of tools. Napier covers a fascinating range of hand-related subjects, each explored through an absorbing blend of anecdote, entertainment, and education. And there's two quotes in it here in the notes. The hand at rest is beautiful in its tranquility, but is infinitely more appealing in the flow of action. When the hand is at rest, the face is at rest, but a lively hand is the product of a lively mind. Well, I'm going to get a copy to read. How about you? Sounds wonderful. Here's a poem by Evan Boland from the UK, The Achille Woman, Achill. She came up the hill carrying water. She wore a half-buttoned wool cardigan, a tea towel round her waist. She pushed her hair out of her eyes with her free hand and put the bucket down. The zinc music of the handle on the rim tuned the evening. An Easter moon rose. In the next-door field, a stream was a fluid sunset, and then stars. I remember the cold rosiness of her hands. She bent down and blew on them like broth, and round her waist on a white background, in coarse woven letters, the words glass-cloth. She was nearly finished for the day, and I was all talk, raw from college weekending at a friend's cottage with one suitcase and the set text of the court poets of the Silver Age. We stayed putting down time until the evening turned cold without warning. She said good night and started down the hill. The grass changed from lavender to black. The trees turned back to cold outlines. You could taste frost. But nothing now can change the way I went indoors, chilled by the wind, and made a fire and took down my book and opened it, and failed to comprehend the harmonies of servitude, the grace music gives to flattery and language borrows from ambition, and how I fell asleep oblivious to the planets clouding over in the skies, the slow decline of the spring moon, the songs crying out their ironies. Thank you, Evan Boland. Long Weekend at Your House by Deborah Gottlieb Harrison. Strands of wind move through your house like the finest blonde hair, like your hair. The porch that needs painting peels its white skin in the sun. We eat breakfast out here, although it is nearly fall and too cold. You've spent a score of summers slipping out this screen door, which sighs. No when opened, yes when closed, out to town or the sea, alone. The caretaker lives in the potting shed, a fair-skinned man with slender hands. He parks his spindly bike against the gate, paints, fries his breakfast in the kitchen's best iron skillet. Together we envy him. From his garden we pilfer the late tomatoes of August. We bite into them like peaches. But it's September, and you tell me how few men you've loved. Outside you point at the scrubby pine, the path to the cliff, the fading rug of summertime. All this you are heir to. Of course I want to be you. Inside, the brown spines of books your parents must have read in their stormiest season. At night I sink into their bed and sleep. Thank you, Deborah Gottlieb Harrison. The Solitude of the Shower is a piece of mine from my days on Central Park West and on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, and being as we are or can be simply in touch with our bodies, I would say, especially in the bath, in the shower. The solitude of the shower. In this white-tiled temple, all is pure, all is quiet, save for the sound of clear water falling and cleansing. The light that pours through the window and drawn white curtain is luminous, like the wet skin of my arms and legs, of my open hands and feet, of my glistening face reflected in the mirror on the shelf where fragrant bars of olive and citrus soap rest. In this warm bubble, where I can be wholly alone with myself, where it's always safe, always welcoming, always full of solitude. Jane Hirschfield. A hand. A hand is not 4 fingers and a thumb. Nor is it palm and knuckles, not ligaments or the fat's yellow pillow, not tendons, star of the wrist bone, meander of veins. A hand is not the thick thatch of its lines with their infinite dramas, nor what it has written, not on the page, not on the ecstatic body. Nor is the hand its meadows of holding, of shaping, not sponge of rising yeast bread, not rotor pin's smoothness, not ink. The maple's green hands do not cup the proliferant rain. What empties itself falls into the place that is open. A hand turned upward holds only a single, transparent question. Unanswerable, humming like bees, it rises, swarms, departs. Thank you, Jane Hirschfield. That's from her collection, Given Sugar, Given Salt, from 2001. Here's an intriguingly beautiful poem, at least to me, by Linda Hogan, The Heron. One of my totem birds, actually. I'm always interested in poems about the heron, but this paired right into our theme. I am always watching the single heron at its place alone at water, its open eye, one leg lifted or waiting without seeming to move. It is a mystery seen but never touched until this morning, when I lift it from its side where it lays breathing. I know the beak that could attack, that unwavering golden eye seeing me, my own saying I am harmless, but if I had that eye, nothing would be safe. The claws hold tight my hand, its dun brown feathers, and the gray so perfectly laid down. The bird is more beautiful than my hand, skin more graceful than my foot, my own dark eye so much more vulnerable, the heart beating quickly, its own language speaking. You could kill me or help me. I know you, and I have no choice but to give myself up, and in whatever supremacy of this moment, hold your human hand with my bent claws. Wow, thank you, Linda Hogan. How about that poem? That's from Rounding the Human Corners. Linda Hogan. Just from a moment on the Cape Cod, up in North Truro, Massachusetts, one September, now 20 years ago, actually, the Prince of Wales, Whales, descended from a long line of whalers, bearded, blubbery, ignoble, festooned from crown to calf with tattoos Queequeg would covet, especially the flourish of squid ink embroidery at the kneecaps and elbows, and the full-face portraits of Ahab abreast and Marlon Brando aft. Just so, and with a cold harpoon ale forever in his right hand, every inch and ounce the Prince of Wales. I remember him. Every time I read that, I remember exactly how I beheld him. As I thought of hands, I also thought of hats, and men tipping them to ladies back in the old days, or holding their hats in their hands, or passing around a hat. And this poem, The Man with the 10-Gallon Heart, was from my friend Barbara Michaels, told me this story, and that led to this poem. So let me have a sip of water before I share it with you. The man with the 10-gallon heart, who stood before you in the old dance hall, 10-gallon hat over his gallant cowboy heart, signaling a courtly invitation to Texas two-step together, a Western gesture you were quietly surprised by, still touched by, in that yellow rose place on that Lone Star night, all the way through other slow and fast country dances, till he returned you to the table of your leading man and placed his hat one last time without words over his grateful heart, and ever so gently and so gentlemanly departed. What of those of you out there with green thumbs and putting your hands in the good earth, in the soil to plant? This is the man with the greening hands. Everything he turns them to sprouts, buds, blossoms. The man with the tenderly nurturing, enlivening hands, springing hands. The man with the verdant garden-singing fingers and palms. That man with such freshly feeling, ever-greening hands. Consider ours and others' ensembles of limbs and appendages, how they move and work together, of what we can see of them at times, and how they can allure us, as they did for me one June in Soho in New York City. The summer is full. The summer is full of lovely legs. The long legs of lithe ladies that draw my eyes from supple thighs under wraps to slender calves, painted toes, sandal straps. The summer is full of silky shoulders, of lip-soft necks and napes, undraped for this sultry season, my senses find so pleasing. The summer is full of smooth arms, loose hands, and long fingers, my gaze lingers on. The summer is full of sweet skin, honeyed in the sun, suffusing the street with the beauty of hothouse flowers. No, let us appreciate with our eyes and other senses, the hands and our other limbs and appendages. Well, what about that sweet joy, yes, of holding a little one's hand as a father or a mother, a grandparent, an uncle or a aunt, or a guiding or protecting adult? Well, this was a poem from London about my French goddaughter Achille and her sister Camille, who were living there as I was visiting. And I took them down into the main thoroughfare, holding hands on Hornton. 4 hands head toward the high street. 2 big ones reach down. 2 small ones reach up, taking a walk with the raindrops. Achille in my left hand, happy in her red hood. Camille in my right, coated in blue stripes, fizzy with conversation and curiosity. Heading toward the high street for treats to little tastes at the corner newsagents they lead me to. Lollipops, chocolates, and chewing gums to squirrel home. A simple jaunt with my girls that yields up a soul smile and a while of daddydom. Love that moment. It will live in me forever. So sweet. What about the cooking and eating we do with our hands? These invaluable tools, instruments, helpers, and feelers. Well, one Easter during my married life, we'd always host my wife's family, the Italians, and they always made the pasta by hand, always, and always gnocchi at our home that same day. So as I observed them making it, I wrote this poem in my head. Gnocchi for 4 hands. Like a nocturne or etude, the fine-boned wrists and fingers of my wife's hands and her mother's hands finesse with familiar ease and grace the ivory dough to make the Easter gnocchi. 143 years of melodies flowing together, rolling out and flowering together, this lovely composition in our sun-bulbed kitchen the afternoon of another Buona Pasqua. Wouldn't mind having some of those gnocchi anytime soon. You were amazing. Here's a poem that I chose for us. It's from Michelangelo's Mouth Dinner. It was a poetry on the plate experience that I curated and choreographed in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, back in 2018. It was memorable in many ways, especially due to an enchanting young lady that I met, a Scotswoman named Iona MacLeod, Macleod. up in the McClouds, is where I met her. When she and her sky-wide spirit and bare, bray shoulders floated into the evening, where there was such feasting, much laughter, streams of music and stories, even dancing, hand to eye to heart, where everything, my body, the scenery, suddenly felt so much lighter than air. I definitely knew that we were going to be speaking at some point here about gestures, hand gestures, so I was curious to find some anecdotes and information as I did in Wikipedia. Gestures, nonverbal communication in which visible bodily actions are used to communicate important messages, either in place of speech or together and in parallel with spoken words. So there are many here, but I'm going to pull out a few that I thought were both one very familiar, but some more interesting and I didn't know about. A-OK or OK, made by connecting the thumb and forefinger in a circle and holding the other finger straight, usually a signal for the word OK. But it is considered obscene in Brazil and Turkey. How about that? So be careful. Careful when you use that. Mano pantea, which is traditionally a traditional way to ward off the evil eye, made by raising the right hand with the palm out and folding the pinky and ring finger. An amulet of it was found in Pompeii, in ancient Pompeii. Mutsa is a traditional insult gesture in Greece made by extending all 5 fingers and presenting the palm or palms toward the person being insulted. M-O-U-T-Z-A. Let's see, I have one more. Oh, yes, the Vulcan Salute. Some of us would know that from Star Trek. It was used in that series, and it consists of all fingers raised and parted between the ring and middle fingers with the thumb sticking out to the side, devised and popularized by Leonard Nimoy, who portrayed the half-Vulcan character Mr. Spock, and wrote in his memoir, I Am Not Spock, that he had based it on the priestly blessing performed by Jewish Kohanim with both hands, thumb to thumb in this same position, representing the Hebrew letter Shin, S-H-I-N. How about that? That's very interesting. I also came across Luciano Cipolla, his blog, blog.busuu.com, Italian hand gestures you should know about. Well, I just chose a couple of them. The rags to riches, or the riches to rags gesture. You place your hand with your palm facing downward. Then, as you speak and reach the subject of the conversation, flip your hand over so that your palm is now facing upward. You use a disappointed or sad expression when you give it, and the phrase that they sometimes use with it is, è cambiato da così a così. He or she changed from this to that. Well, if you're Italian, you're way ahead of us all because you know exactly what that's about. Hope I did it some justice. And then there's the pine cone hand gesture, the most classic of all Italian gestures known to man, says this chap. Gather your fingertips to one imaginary point, making sure to keep your fingers stretched out. Okay. So you use this when someone says something silly, and you say, "Ma che fai?" But what are you doing? Or "Ma dove vai?" But where are you going? And last is the spaghettata gesture. Use your index and middle finger to imitate a fork picking up spaghetti. Your elbow should face sideward. You use it when you're hungry and really craving spaghetti. And your expression should be a self-satisfied look, and the phrase you say is spaghettata, a round of spaghetti. So there you go. If you're in the mood, you can call that out and then explain what on earth you're doing. Thoughtco.com and told me about a couple of French gestures. I couldn't resist throwing some French gestures in here. They're obviously frequently used when speaking French. Unfortunately, many are not often taught in French classes. And I also say watch French films if you want to see them in action, or if you know French people, very French people. one of my favorite films, full of the classic gestures, and it's a comedy, is Monsieur Hulot, H-U-L-O-T, Monsieur Hulot's Holiday with Jacques Tati. Absolutely. I've seen it, I mean, dozens and dozens of times. I can't get over it. There's very little talking, but the gestures are marvelous. Okay, a couple of gestures. Bof, B-O-F. It's the Gallic shrug, stereotypically French. It's commonly a sign of indifference or disagreement, but it could also mean, it's not my fault. I don't know, I doubt it, I don't agree, or I don't care. Raise your shoulders, hold up your arms at the elbows with your palms facing out, stick out your lower lip, raise your eyebrows and say, boff. I was having fun doing some of these today. I took a few moments just to fool around with them. Varron nu, the French gesture for let's get out of here. It's very common, but it's also familiar, so use it with care. It's also known as on se tire. To make this gesture, hold your hands out, palms down, and smack one hand down onto the other. Varron nu. And last, jet du nez. When you tap the side of your nose with your index finger, you're saying that you are clever and quick thinking, or you've done or said something smart. Jet du nez literally means that you have a good nose for sensing something. So there you go, giving you a few tips, a few fun things to do. I also thought of Braille. That sprang to mind. Reading with your hands, right, instead of your eyes. And also from Wikipedia, I looked it up. It can be read either on embossed paper or by using refreshable Braille displays that connect to computers and smartphone devices. It can be written using a slate and stylus, a Braille writer, an electronic Braille note taker, or with the use of a computer connected to a Braille embosser. It's named after its creator, Louis Braille, a Frenchman who lost his sight as a result of a childhood accident. In 1824, at the age of 15, he developed the Braille code based on the French alphabet as an improvement on night writing. Today, there are Braille codes for over 133 languages. And sign languages, speaking of hands, they have some things I definitely didn't know about. They are full-fledged natural languages with their own grammar and lexicon. They are not universal and are usually not mutually intelligible with each other. Linguists consider both spoken and sign communication to be types of natural language, meaning that both emerged through an abstract, protracted aging process and evolved over time without meticulous planning. Wherever communities of deaf people exist, sign languages have developed as useful means of communication, and they form the core of local, quote, deaf cultures. The number of them worldwide is not precisely known, but each country has its own native sign language, and some have more than one. Wow, very interesting. Groups of deaf people have used sign languages throughout history. One of the earliest written records of a sign language is from the 5th century BC in Plato's Cratylus, where Socrates says, if we hadn't a voice or a tongue and wanted to express things to one another, wouldn't we try to make signs by moving our hands, head, and the rest of our body? Okay. But you might find that interesting also. How about palmistry? Also from Wikipedia. Also known as palm reading, chiromancy, or chirology, C-H-I-R-O. The practice of fortune-telling through the study of the palm, found all over the world, with numerous cultural variations. Those who practice it are generally called palmists, hand readers, hand analysts, or chirologists. It is practiced by the Hindu Brahmins and also indirectly referenced in the Book of Job. Common to many different places on the Eurasian landmass as we speak. It had been practiced in the cultures of India, Nepal, Tibet, China, Persia, Sumeria, Canaan, and Babylonia, of course, going back in time. The acupuncturist Yoshiaki Omura describes its roots in Hindu astrology. And there is, in Renaissance magic, it was classified as one of the 7 forbidden arts. And a pivotal figure in modern palmistry in that movement was the Irish man William John Warner. He was known as Chairo, Cheiro. After studying under gurus in India, he set up a palmistry practice in London, 1880s, and enjoyed a wide following of famous clients, including celebrities like Mark Twain, Sarah Bernhardt, Mata Hari, Oscar Wilde, Grover Cleveland, Thomas Edison, the Prince of Wales, General Kitchener, and Joseph Chamberlain. So popular was he as a society palmist that even those who were not believers in the occult had their hands read by him. Mark Twain skeptically wrote in the visitor's book that he had, quote, exposed my character to me with humiliating accuracy. How about that? Have you ever had your palm read? I did once. It was intriguing. Contemplating those forbidden arts, those ethereal arts, reminded me of a poem of mine, and the mysterious of how they sometimes emerge, poems, for me anyway. I never always intend to sit down and write one in particular. They come upon me different times, sometimes in the middle of the night, sometimes early in the morning or middle of the day, or I'm walking or whatever, doing cooking, whatever is going on, conversing with someone. This is the spirit board. Sometimes writing a poem feels like a Ouija at work. When the mind and the moment are entrancingly still, and a heart-shaped hand, my hand, floats a pen over the page to let my spirit speak. In sudden words, ascending lines, say whatever it wants to say, needs to say, in surprising and mysterious ways, ways I can't predict, don't control. Just let it move. Made me think of another Jane Hirschfield poem, Fado, in the Portuguese ballad genre. A man reaches close and lifts a quarter from inside a girl's ear. From her hands takes a dove she didn't know was there, which amazes more. You may wonder, the quarter's serrated murmur against the thumb, or the dove's knuckled silence, that he found them, or that she never had, or that in Portugal, this same half-stop moment, it's almost dawn, and a woman in a wheelchair is singing a fado that puts every life in the room on one pan of a scale, itself on the other, and the copper bowls balance. Thank you, Jane Hirschfield. There are, of course, violent things done with hands, with fists, fingers, by civilians and military alike, and things done to perpetrators' hands in response, like putting them in handcuffs. So I was curious about handcuffs. And I came across from unitedlocksmith.uk. What we now think of as handcuffs have a documented history dated back all the way to around 70 BC in the writings of the poet Virgil, who's largely credited with the first written account of what are traditionally considered handcuffs. In the myth of Proteus, manacles were described as the only way to trap the shape-shifter. In fact, Virgil's description of that mythical locking device comes much closer to modern handcuffs than the shackles and chains of previous accounts. How about that? How about that? And of course, hand-to-hand combat. It's actually sometimes abbreviated as HTH or H2H, physical confrontation between two or more persons at short range, grappling distance, or within the physical reach of a handheld weapon. But it does not necessarily involve the use of ranged weapons. Well, it's the most ancient form of fighting known, talking about ancient practices, and a majority of cultures have their own histories related to close combat and their own methods of practice. The pankration, which was practiced in ancient Greece and Rome, is an example of a form which involved nearly all strikes and holds, with biting and gouging being the only exceptions. Many modern varieties of martial arts, such as boxing and wrestling, were also practiced historically. I should add, for my brother, karate. He's a karate master of the martial arts. And Celtic wrestling, mentioned in the Thaltian games dating back from somewhere between 1839 BC to 632 BC. How about that? Well, moving along. Dylan Thomas, the hand that signed the paper. The hand that signed the paper felled a city. 5 sovereign fingers taxed the breath, doubled the globe of dead and halved a country. These 5 kings did a king to death. The mighty hand leads to a sloping shoulder. The finger joints are cramped with chalk. A goose's quill has put an end to murder that put an end to talk. The hand that signed the treaty bred a fever, and famine grew and locusts came. Great is the hand that holds dominion over man by a scribbled name. The 5 kings count the dead, but do not soften the crusted wound nor pat the brow. A hand rules pity as a hand rules heaven. Hands have no tears to flow. Maybe that's apropos somehow. Thank you, Dylan Thomas. The power of hands. The effect of hands can, yes, be so far-reaching depending on who they belong to, and in this case, the Pope, Benedict XVI, the German Pope. And my chance witnessing of him in Rome another time, and my perspective from a once very Catholic boy, this is La Festa di Santo Stefano, the feast of Saint Stefano. At the 12th stroke of St. Peter's clock, tick-tock, tick-tock, Angelus, Angelus, the shutters swing open on the face of the apostolic palace, and a pope pops out. Pace, 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 and clasping holier-than-thou hands, and bowing slightly and ultra-whitely, he slides back inside behind the shutters until it's high time to reappear. Here's Mary Ruefle's poem, which took me and might take you back to childhood school days. The hand. The teacher asks a question. You know the answer. You suspect you are the only one in the classroom who knows the answer because the person in question is yourself. And on that, you are the greatest living authority. But you don't raise your hand. You raise the top of your desk and take out an apple. You look out the window. You don't raise your hand, and there is some essential beauty in your fingers, which aren't even drumming, but lie flat and peaceful. The teacher repeats the question. Outside the window, on an overhanging branch, a robin is ruffling its feathers, and spring is in the air. Thank you, Mary Ruefle. The hand. Lovely. Holding a drink. Think of all your experiences holding one. A good glass of wine, a delicious cup of coffee, or a cold bottle of beer, or a memorable cocktail. Here's Whiskey Sours, a poem from my grandfather. Now I know why you love the taste of that froth and tartness and whiskey on your tongue. The wisp of a sip I had of it each time you kissed me on my boy lips when you came to visit. Now that I have, in my later years, come to appreciate and ably make that classic cocktail, among others, that sour, 2 parts bourbon, 1 part freshly squeezed lemon juice, simple syrup, and egg white, all dry shaken, then again with ice, poured and now held in my grown man's hand, that you'd appreciate, that we'd clink with, grandfather to grandson, and in return, that I sip and savor and raise here quietly to honor those sweet days and my always good memories made of you. Whiskey Sours, my dear grandfather, loved him to smithereens. Well, here's a cocktail I created, as I have and do as a passionate mixologist still, the genuflector. This was from the Church of the Eternal Spring, as I called it, Cobble Hill, Brooklyn, April 2017. The genuflector. Anoint each highball with a trinity of fingers of bourbon. Muddle in wedges of lime, fronds of fragrant fennel. Add a celestially golden drop of raw wildflower honey, fresh lime juice, a slice of kumquat requiescat, and a graceful handful of ice. Stir, genuflect gently, and serve irreverently. The kissing of hands. This is from lemetropole.com. Since some of this side of our theme is called for, I would say. So in here, the hand kiss, meaning, history, in the proper way. A couple of excerpts. There are various versions of the hand kiss. For most, if not all of them, it serves as a sign of respect. To know what a particular hand kiss means, you must observe the specific situation it's used in. So they speak of it, that it dates back several centuries. Finding anything before the 8th century is challenging. Homer's Iliad includes a scene describing hand kissing, so obviously it goes back at least that far. It has been observed in Europe and elsewhere. It's still alive in places such as Turkey, Malaysia, Somalia, and it's used to express respect for their elderly. Certainly Central and Eastern European countries still have gentlemen kissing a woman's hand as a polite gesture. It started to die down during the turn of the 20th century. And so talking about showing respect for the elders, in Muslim countries, kissing the hand of the elders is widely practiced. In exchange, the older person in the family can bless the person, expressing respect. They may say their blessing or simply hold the head of the person kissing their hand. It's lovely. Imagine just sort of picturing that. I think I've seen that in some films. And most likely the younger people in the family do not wait for the hand to be offered. They will immediately go to their elder and show their love by kissing their hands. Well, in the Philippines, and I know I've got a few friends from the Philippines who are listening to this, the younger people do not technically kiss the hands of their elders. Instead, they take the hand and place it on their foreheads. And I know because I've had that experience, and it's quite beautiful. Well, I spoke in the opening about the connection of hands to language and to love. And here's Kevin Varron's poem I wrote sitting across the table from you. If I had 2 nickels to rub together, I would rub them together like a kid rubs sticks together until friction made combustion and they burned a hole in my pocket, into which I would put my hand and then my arm and eventually my whole self. I would fold myself into the hole in my pocket and disappear into the pocket of myself, or at least my pants. But before I did, like some ancient star, I'd grab your hand. Thank you, Kevin Varron. There's a poem from Bonaire from the Dutch Antilles, one April many years back. This is for a love of that time of mine. Hands. The soles of our hands touch. The soles in our hands touch. Pablo Neruda, Sonetos de Amor, love sonnet number 81. And now you're mine. Rest with your dream and my dream. Love and pain and work should all sleep now. The night turns on its invisible wheels, and you are pure beside me as a sleeping ember. No one else, love, will sleep in my dreams. You will go, we will go together over the waters of time. No one else will travel through the shadows with me, only you, ever green, ever sun, ever moon. Your hands have already opened their delicate fists and let their soft drifting signs drop away. Your eyes close like 2 gray wings, and I move after, following the folding water you carry that carries me away. The night, the world, the wind spin out their destiny. Without you, I am your dream, only that, and that is all. Thank you, Pablo Neruda. Elwood Colohan from 1930, Hand on a Harp. Like the rose-breasted swallows at sunset that glide and skim in the twilight above the pale gold of the river, touching the surface so lightly that the smooth glints of the little ringlets might elude me, except that I love them. Aye, even as the swallows, her hands, all shadow and rose in the flickering light of the fire, flicked dreamlike over the golden strings, dipping with exquisite faintness till the circles of sound would filter away to the heavy darkness, except that I love them. Thank you, Elwood Callahan. This poem, Hearing Their Hearts, was of mine for the Soul Friends at my 60th birthday soiree in Harlem in 2018. I move round a candlelit dinner table of 9, wearing a silver-belled stethoscope, lean down over the chairs and shoulders of each dear, so near to me here friend. Bring a gentle hand, holding the listening disc, unto each warm chest, in turn, to hear, through the open window of every celebrating breast, the rhythm, limn, hymn of their hearts, playing so clearly, so beautifully into my ears, flowing so freely, so gladly through the chambers of my echoing heart. To you of hidden heart, of sad or lonely, longing and deserving heart hidden from view, I hold out a hand. To yours, sense what you cannot say in words or feel easy to show. Offer a gentleness to soften your reticence, a safe harbor for your hiddenness, a place for your heart to enter and freely drop its sometime achingly heavy anchor. Who, dear listeners like this, could use the comfort of your hand? Could you hold one out to? This is from poets.org. By hand. I could call it an article, but I'm just going to read you the opening part. I didn't care about the gift. It was the note I wanted, the salt from his hand, the words. Admits a woman awaiting a Mother's Day package from her son away at war, in Francis Ritchie's poem Letters. There's no substitute for the intimacy of a handwritten note, no gift as singular as words carefully considered and chosen. The impulse to personalize correspondence is evident in the custom to sign letters by hand, even when the rest is typed. Like a fingerprint, handwriting can identify its owner. Even mood and intention can be revealed in the bends and crosses of letters hidden in the slant of cursive. In her poem, Consider the Hands That Write This Letter, Achille Woman describes the act of writing. Well, here that is. Consider the hands that write this letter. Consider the hands that write this letter, the left palm pressed flat against the paper, as it has done before, over my heart, in peace or reverence. To the sea or some beautiful thing I saw once, felt once, snow falling like rice flung from the giant's wedding, or the strangest birds. And consider, then, the right hand and how it is a fist within which a sharpened utensil, similar to the way I've held a spade, matched to the wick, the horse's reins, loping, the very fists I've seen from the roads to Lime and Esteli. For years I have come to sit this way, one hand open, one hand closed, like a farmer who puts down seeds and gathers up the food that comes from that farming. Or yes, it is like the way I've danced with my left hand opened around a shoulder and my right hand closed inside of another hand. And how I pray for this to be my way. Sweet work alluded to in the body's position to its paper. Left hand, right hand like an open eye, an eye closed, one hand flat against the trapdoor, the other hand knocking. Thank you, Achille Woman. Knitting by hand. I have a dear friend who is a knitter. That's her Zen in Baltimore. I remember my paternal grandmother, Olympic needlepointer. Beautiful work, and I so recall from my childhood her patient and focused flow with that. And the pleasure, the joy of having still some beautiful hand-knit sweaters and scarves, all made with care, I know, and some with very loving hands. This is a P.K. Page's poem, Knitter's Prayer. Unknit me, all those blistering, strange, small, intricate stitches, shell stitch, moss stitch, pearl, and all too plain. Unknit me to the very first row of ribbing. Let only the original simple knot remain. Then let us start again. Thank you, P.K. Page. Jackie Shelton Green's poem, I know the grandmother one had hands. I know the grandmother one had hands, but they were always in bowls, folding, pinching, rolling the dough, making the bread. I know the grandmother one had hands, but they were always underwater, sifting rice, bluing clothes, starching lives. I know the grandmother one had hands, but they were always in the earth, planting seeds, removing weeds, growing knives, burying sons. I know the grandmother one had hands, but they were always under the cloth, pushing it along, helping it birth into skirt, dress, curtains to lock out night. I know the grandmother one had hands, but they were always inside the hair, parting, pleating, twisting it into rainbows. I know the grandmother one had hands, but they were always inside pockets, holding the knots, counting the twisted veins, holding onto herself, let her hands disappear into sky. I know the grandmother one had hands, but they were always inside the clouds, poking holes for the rain to fall. Thank you, Jackie Shelton Green. This is a leg up. We've been given so many in our life, so many helping hands, warmly welcoming arms, at times of our life when we couldn't go it or bear it or figure it out alone. Generous, loving, sometimes surprising legs up that enabled us, empowered us to get to a next essential place, help to be grateful for, to return in any kind to others, wherever, however we can. All right, we're coming down to the last few things. I had one I wanted to read you. I'll save it for another time if it fits. It's the Irish poet Padraig Tuama, Shaking Hands. But I don't know if we're going to... No, I think we'll pass on it. But I would like to read you, as we come into these last sharings and also come towards spring, E. Cummings' poem, Spring is like a perhaps hand. Spring is like a perhaps hand which comes carefully out of nowhere, arranging a window into which people look while people stare, arranging and changing, placing carefully there a strange thing and a known thing here, and changing everything carefully. Spring is like a perhaps hand in a window, carefully to and fro moving new and old things, while people stare carefully, moving a perhaps fraction of flower here, placing an inch of air there, and without breaking anything. Ted Kusser. So this is Nebraska. The gravel road rides with a slow gallop over the fields, the telephone line streaming behind, its billow of dust full of the sparks of red-winged blackbirds. On either side, those dear old ladies, the loosening barns, their little windows dulled by cataracts of hay and cobwebs, hide broken tractors under their skirts. So this is Nebraska, a Sunday afternoon, July, driving along with your hand out, squeezing the air, a meadowlark waiting on every post. Behind a shelter belt of cedars, top deep in hollyhocks, pollen, and bees, a pickup kicks its fenders off and settles back to read the clouds. You feel like that. You feel like letting your tires go flat, like letting the mice build a nest in your muffler, like being no more than a truck in the weeds, clucking with chickens or sticky with honey, or holding a skinny old man in your lap while he watches the road, waiting for someone to wave to. You feel like waving. You feel like stopping the car and dancing around on the road. You wave instead and leave your hand out, gliding lark-like over the wheat, over the houses. Thank you, Ted Kusser. And next to last, remember, my friends, you have wings. Your hands are wings. Your hands. And your feet are wings. Yes, and your eyes. Those lips, wings. That heart, too, has wings. It, all of you, can fly. And until we meet again, let us praise the hands. All the hands, the surgeons, the ship captains, the cellists, the tailors, the mothers, the mimes, the good hands that heal and steer, serenade and shape, soothe and speak to us. All the hands. Thank you again, each and all, for leaning in, floating in, feeling in, and to those of you who listen often. If you have a new theme you'd like me to speak to, or a question, comment, or kudo, do send me a note. I'd be glad to hear from you. My email is colin@thepoetorialist.com. If you'd like to say thank you for this show or an earlier one, or all of them with a donation, I'd be grateful, as every gift helps support my creating of these programs. You can contribute by Venmo to fivefold@pipeline.com, or directly through my site, thepoetorialist.com, and the Donate tab there. Or simply by mail to me at P.O. Box 1032, Westerly, Rhode Island, 02891. If you'd like to host me as a working artist, a poet in residence, on a property for a set span of time to create a new flight of poetic art, come spring, summer, or beyond, and dedicate it to you while there, reach out and we'll explore the opportunity. I also welcome invitations to be a virtual artist in residence, a poetic presence for an online community. Meanwhile, you can hear all the broadcasts online, on YouTube, on the Floating Poetry playlist. I hope you'll lean in soon again. Until then, dear listeners, here's to celebrating and honoring your hands, the hands you have and rely on for so much, the helping hands others have given you, or may be giving you now, and that you give or have given to others in their lives. And the hands that, like our hearts, we can join with those of like spirits out in our communities and our world right now, where together they can make a real and needed difference. Goodbye to you all for now, and good spirits.